So our final topic for this week is 3D graphics, and again a little caveat: we're just sort of going to be skimming the surface of this. So just introducing the concept of 3D graphics, showing you that you can do 3D in processing, and giving you a few tools just to kind of put your toe in the water. Any real 3D developer would scoff, I guess, at what we're doing. So just I don't want to discourage you, but I just want to make sure you understand this is a whole big area that we're really only just going to touch on. Having said that, transitioning from 2D graphics to 3D graphics in processing doesn't have to be super complicated. Really all you need to do is you change your size method to, as well as specifying the size of the window, also specify that you're using P3D mode, so you're drawing in processing 3D mode. And after that, a lot of the drawing methods that you use is pretty much exactly the same as in 2 dimensions, except that now we're going to be using 3 dimensions. So instead of having just X and Y coordinates, X being left and right, Y being up and down, we now have X, Y, and Z, with Z sort of going into, which way am I pointing? With Z going into and sort of coming out of the screen. So let's look at some code examples to show you, let's give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is Simple Cube 2. Pretty straightforward. As I say, we're using our size method to specify we're in 3D mode now. We're setting the stroke weight to be 6, so I'm just setting so that the lines that we're drawing around the shapes, the lines that go around the outline of the shapes we're drawing are fairly big so we can see them easily. We're doing a translate to the middle of the screen, just as we've done with 2D graphics. So our 0, 0 point is now sort of the middle of the screen. Then I'm doing some rotation. In a moment you'll see why I do that. And then I'm drawing a box. So just as we might draw, as in probably the very first lecture, I think we drew a square on screen. In this case we're drawing a box, so the 3D equivalent of a square is a box or a cube. So let's run it and just see what it looks like. And there it is. Depending on how your vision works, you might be seeing a cube or you might be seeing a weird shape, but most people would see a cube when they look at this. I mentioned before that I did some rotation. If I don't do the rotation and we just draw the box on the screen, oh, have I crashed processing? Okay, I don't know why that took so long. If I just draw the box on the screen without rotating it, we're looking at the cube sort of face on, and we don't get any sense of 3D effect. So that's why I added a little bit of rotation there. We're just rotating around the X and Y axes by I forget what it is, 45 degrees or something like that. Just so you get a sense of a cube. Okay, so we can also, of course, use our draw method to animate our 3D shapes. So what we're doing here is very similar to what we would do in 2-dimensional processing. Again, we've got our setup method setting our size of the screen, saying we're in 3D mode. And then in the draw method, we're doing everything we did before, but now we have a little bit of extra code which just gets a bit of rotation going, so that we rotate the box sort of by 1 degree each time we use the draw method. We've done a similar thing previously in 2 dimensions, but when you do it in 3 dimensions, you can now get 3D effects, which is pretty cool. So now we see a nice cube rotating in 3 dimensions. When it comes to when you start messing around with 3 dimensions, you'll start to realize that lighting is very important. And if you get the lighting wrong, you often will be drawing things in a 3D scene, but you won't be able to see them because the way you've configured the lighting is incorrect. So it's good to get a sense of, it's good to start thinking about lighting in 3 dimensions. Processing uses one approach to lighting. There are several others. And there's a few different methods that you use to mess around with the lighting. There is the ambient method that lets you set the color of a shape. So this is whether you want your cube to be yellow or orange. So that sets the color of that actual shape, yellow, orange, purple, green, whatever. You can also set the color of any ambient light that might be in a scene. So if you imagine you're putting your cube in a special, in a theater, and within that theater you have a bunch of lights and so on, you can set a kind of ambient light wash color. So you do that with ambient light. Sort of sets a kind of general light in the scene, not like a spotlight, but more just directionless kind of ambient light. There's also a light specular method, which sets the color of a directional or a sort of highlight lighting. So maybe the color of a spotlight type effect. There is also the directional light method, which basically sets the color of and points a directional light at your scene. Again, like a spotlight, and you specify what direction that light points in. Does it point from the top right of your scene, or does it point from the back out from the screen, or where? That's quite important. Also, you can use the shininess method to say how shiny your shape is. And there is also a kind of a handy lights method, which if you are not too fussed about the details of the lighting, but you do want to just see what's in your 3D scene, you can use that to kind of turn on generic but functional lighting. So what we'll do to give you a sense of how this works is open up a sketch. So let me run it to show you what it does. And you see it draws a sphere for us, a nice ball there on the screen, with all the lighting and everything switched on and looking pretty nice. So let's look at the code here. So size and background should be familiar to you. We don't draw the outline around the sphere. We say how detailed we want our sphere to be. Do we want it to be very high resolution or very low resolution? If I turn this down to be, instead of 170 but 20, our sphere will look not as nice. And what we'll do now is let's draw our sphere as before, but I'll turn out all the light. And that's what our sphere looks like. So we're not getting much of a sense of a 3D shape there, a 3D object in that. So if I turn on the ambient light, oh, sorry, that didn't do anything. They just set the color of the ambient light, but it didn't actually turn it on. So I set the color here and then turn on the ambient light. And we're starting to see a bit more of our sphere, or it's starting to have a sort of more, we're getting a sense of some light in the scene, but still not very appropriate. Let's put some spotlighty kind of highlight effects in there, shining sort of spotlights on the surface. And now we're starting to get a sense that this really is a 3D sphere and not just a 2D circle. And let's dial up the shininess of our sphere so that it's really reflective. And that's our final simple 3D scene with one sphere in it. So that gives you some sense of the control over lighting that you have in basic 3D programming in processing. So you can draw your 3D shapes in processing with the built-in shapes like spheres and boxes and so on. You can, as with the 2D drawing and processing we've done previously, you can also draw your own custom shapes using the vertex command. So this time the vertex command doesn't just take X and Y parameters, it also takes a Z parameter specifying that this is a point in 3D space, not just in 2D space anymore. As far as processing goes, positive Z numbers are coming towards you out of the screen, and negative Z numbers are going away from you or in towards the screen. So let's look at a really simple example of drawing custom shapes in 3D using the vertex command. This is the vertex 3D example. So this example should be very familiar really for you. The only difference is we're in 3D mode and all our vertex commands are using 3 coordinates rather than just 2, X, Y, and Z rather than just X and Y. So I'm specifying some points here at various positions in the 3D scene. Using begin shape and end shape to mark the beginning and the end of the shape, and when I run it we see this. So it's a 3D shape, but it might not look 3D. We can't really perceive it as being 3D. We could just perceive it as being a regular kind of what do you call that, parallelogram or something, a regular kind of four-sided shape in 2 dimensions. To get a sense of the 3D-ness of it, we need to start rotating it a little bit so we can see that it really is a 3D shape rather than just a 2D one. So here I'm doing some similar code to before. Just in our draw method, we're basically rotating the shape by 1 degree in the X, around the X and Y, I think, or is it just around Y? Just around Y. Rotating it around the Y axis by 1 degree every time we do the draw method. So when we do that and run it, we start to see as it rotates that we actually are looking at a 3D shape. To get a better sense of this and to show you that all this 3D stuff can also be made interactive, I've got a very simple example here. This is Vertex 3D mouse rotation, where I'm just using the mouse X and Y coordinates to set the rotation angle around the X and Y axis, and then displaying the shape we just drew. So here you can see as I'm moving the mouse, we're interacting in 3 dimensions. Of course, not in a very sophisticated way, but just giving you a sense of how you can make interactive 3D sketches in processing. And the final thing I will show you in this very, very brief introduction to 3D graphics is that often in 3D you want to create a shape like we've just done, and then instead of just having a plain color on it, a block color or some kind of gradient, you might want to put a texture on that 3D shape. You might want to put an image on that 3D shape as a texture. And we can do that, not too tricky. So this is exactly the same example I just showed. We've got our mouse X and Y values setting the rotation of the screen. We're drawing the same shape we drew before, but you'll see there's this extra line of code here, texture, and we're passing in an image we loaded from disk, the church example from all the previous examples we've been looking at. So we're loading in that image, and then we're saying texture this shape that we're drawing with that image. So it should take that church image, that one, and sort of layer it over the top of our 3D shape that we're drawing here, and then let us rotate it with our mouse. So let's take a look at how that works. So there you go. Then you can see we kind of have 3D shape textured with an image. So with that, I have shown you the very basics of starting to get into three-dimensional drawing with processing. As I've said, there is a lot more to it, but in the time that we have in this subject, it is at least an introduction to you, and you may want to incorporate some 3D effects perhaps into your assignments. At the very least, I encourage you just to mess around with it and see what you can come up with, so you get some sense of the world of 3D and how you can use that in processing. Okay, I look forward to seeing you all in class.